What's masculine and strong is to recognize and acknowledge that you could use some polishing up in an area, and then go find tools that'll help you do that.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Tales from the Journey. I'm Stephanie Zamora, and today I am here with Sean Gala, founder of mensgroup.com. Sean, thank you so much for being here with us.
I'm excited to be here, Stephanie. Thanks.
Yeah, I would love for you to start by sharing just a bit about you and what it is that you do.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm excited to be here. I love your set. I need a better set. This is pretty. This is part of my approach.
I worked hard on this.
Yeah, it looks like it. I like it. I need a sign. I run men's groups for normal guys who just want to have a chat, over at mensgroup.com. I joined a men's group. I found it to be very beneficial to my life. And when I asked my friends why they didn't want to get into it, it's because they thought they were kooky or kind of for losers. I was like, that's weird. It feels like a tool that's for a winner. So I looked around, and all these men's groups that were online were doing chanting or had adopted First Nations names, or were blowing sage with owl wings and stuff like that. And I was like, that's cool, but I can see why people are put off by this. I can see why men find it, intimidating. And there was nobody who's doing an approachable group for guys that just want to talk about their lives, not necessarily do heavy emotional work or cry and sing Kumbaya or anything like that. Just share what's going on. And so that's what we have going on over at mensgroup.com.
Awesome. And I know that you went through your own period of adversity and struggle. And so I'd love to start there, kind of what your life looked like before and all the different things that you walked through. I know there was quite a bit that was going on for you.
Yeah. I was living in Mexico at the time. I had fallen in love with a woman. We moved down there, and what looked like a lovely life on Facebook turned into a challenging time for me because I felt quite isolated. And even though I had friends down there I could surf with, I felt quite alone, and alone with my challenges, alone with my thoughts. And it was a beautiful time, but I realized I could use some support. So I just threw some of my friends into a Facebook group to have some conversations. That was 10 years ago. And when Facebook groups were a new thing, and the women didn't really stick around. It seemed like they already had that kind of community. And then, all these guys from all over the different parts of the world started engaging in these conversations about business and life, and just seemed like they really needed it.
Yeah.
And so that turned into my first men's group.
That's awesome. What was it like for you? I know there's a lot of conversation, and you have this conversation in some of your videos and on your website about how difficult it is in our culture and our societies for men to admit, I need help and I want to have these conversations. There's a lot of stigma around it. So what was it like for you in your 20s to kind of go through that process for yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. I see in men's group, the biggest reason why men come to a men's group in general, whether it's ours or another one, is because they feel like they're scared to bring up whatever it is they're feeling or situations they're in, simply because they've been ridiculed their whole lives for doing so. And there's been a lot of disapproval or shame around different things they've been feeling or thinking. And so they come into these men's groups. So that's the biggest thing I've noticed them bringing into it, and why they come to us. Sorry, what was the second part of that question?
What was that process like for you to decide for yourself, this is what I need, and then to create it?
Great question. I just noticed, so I grew up playing hockey, right? I was more of an A-type kid growing up, a competitive hockey player. And I love that camaraderie in the dressing room and being able to talk about stuff after the game. It's like after you'd been to battle with a guy or had shared an experience with a guy, that's when guys would open up a little bit and talk about their relationships, or, talk about how to be a better father, or whatever it was that they were going through. And then after my hockey career, if you want to call it that, ended, and I was out on my own, I realized there was a lack of that. And then it wasn't until I moved down to Mexico and then felt really isolated that I realized that, wow, I really missed that. And then what was interesting was actually, once I started this group, seeing a lot of these guys were very successful and very popular, and in places like New York or London or Beijing, and they still felt like the exact same thing that I was feeling. They still felt like that there's this subtle isolation. So for me, I got dragged to my first men's group by a friend. I didn't really want to go, and I just loved it because it reminded me of those hockey locker room days,
Yeah, definitely. How did that first men's group really help you with your own growth and healing? Because I know you mentioned on your website, again, just a lot going on. I believe you said eating disorder, depression,
Hmm.
chronic health issues. How did it really play a role in that healing for you?
Yeah, I think it helped each of those individually in different ways, but the summary of all of them was like it it gave me a place to work through those things. I wasn't alone with my thoughts. It gave me a place to bounce things off the guys, and then they'd share stories from their own lives about how they manage similar things. And so it was great because I come in a meeting and I'd be nervous or intimidated to share about the binge eating issue I've had as a result of some emotional issues, or like the I went bankrupt due to a business failure, for example. I've had partners cheat on me. I've had close people to me pass away and these kinds of things. And especially in those times, I found it so great to just be able to bring those somewhere that's not my partner or my
Yeah.
family, work through them, and then bring the fruits of that back to my life. And
Yeah.
so every single one of those examples of getting cheated on, the eating addiction kind of thing, um, it's like I bring those to the group thinking I was the only one, and then sure enough there'd be 3 or 4 guys out of the 10 that would be like, oh yeah, I'm dealing with that too, or I went through something similar. And so it normalized it, it took the pressure off, and it just made it so much more manageable. And then number two, I got to actually like workshop through how to navigate these situations.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's really powerful. I've been in a lot of, I mean, like you said, I feel like women have more of that already inherent to just how we are in our relationships. But the support of that reflection and especially the validation of you're not crazy and you're not alone is so huge. And I don't think enough men are getting that today. So I love that you shared that. Was there any particular moment that felt like hitting bottom? Or was it more of a series of moments that made you realize that you wanted something to change in your life or for yourself?
Oh, that's such a great question. I feel like I've hit bottom like a number of times. And I probably will again. I don't even know
Yeah.
if I found bottom yet, but but yeah, I think I'm grateful because for whatever reason, I'm the kind of person who, when things get really bad, I'll take action. I'll do something about it. The lowest low for me was probably getting sick. I just I burnt myself out. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was working too hard and trying to deal with the emotions of a breakup by chasing other women and trying to like be a high achieving person in my career and traveling a lot and partying, and ended up coming down with a chronic illness. And I spent a couple of years in bed basically. And that was the
Yeah.
lowest of low. That was the darkest of the dark. And yeah, I reached for any tool I could to get support during that time. So
Yeah.
I didn't have like I never had like actually I've had multiple moments where I'm like, ooh, something needs to change. But that's like an ongoing thing for me. It's like run into a challenge, find tools to help, run into a challenge,
Yeah.
find tools to help. And some of those challenges are lower and darker than others, but that's how my process works. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. What do you feel like kind of built that into you as a person? Is it something that you learned at some point? Was it just always there?
Honestly, I'm not even sure that it comes from a good place. Like it could come from a place of trying to fill a void, like needing to be somebody who's high achieving
Yeah.
and needing to be successful by my own terms and stuff. Like it might be an insecurity more than anything, but uh, I don't know. I guess my parents had the same resolve, kind of grit, to them. But I also just saw people around me that they were going through tough times, and there was a distinction between the people who like, okay, honor the emotional experience of that, but also like, you know, access the resources that were available to make change. I saw them actually like becoming more fulfilled in the long term, versus people who
Yeah.
didn't. And so I think just seeing people around me reaching out for tools and help when they needed it and getting results, and that creating a positive reinforcement cycle for me.
Yeah. One of the things that we talk about in the journey mapping process, which is the work that I do, is
Yeah.
this idea that the hitting rock bottom, the fall is not the hard part. The hard part is the work that comes after that. And so I would love to
Mm.
hear your own take on, you were dragged to a men's group that you didn't necessarily want to go to, and now you're having this experience of, wow, I have a resource and I have people that can help me. But what was it like for you moment to moment, day to day, to really make the choice to create something different with yourself and your life?
Oh, it feels impossible day to day, you know? It feels so difficult. It's like, you know, you hit rock bottom, you get inspired, and then 3 days later, you're faced with your own habits and your own like neurological
Yeah.
hardwiring and stuff like that. And it's just really difficult to create change in your life. But I feel like now I feel like that is the only journey we can be on. That's like that is the true hero's journey, right? It's like mastering that stuff within ourselves and those issues we run
Yeah.
into, our emotional hangups and those kinds of things. So yeah, for me, it was a process of really taking it day by day. It's like, what can I do about this today? Okay, maybe it's just reading a book, or maybe it's just a small action, but it was like continuing to make progress forward. That was the only answer. And there's some days where I didn't, and I had to be really easy with myself, you know, during those times too. But it was just chipping away however you can, getting momentum, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'd love to know what your self-talk was like. I feel like everyone really struggles with that.
Yeah.
Like it's easy to look back and say, this is what I did, and I took it moment to moment, and I had to like get the energy to do it. But in those moments, at least for me, there was a ton of beating myself up of, why am I still here? Why is this so hard? Why can't I change? I feel like I'm taking one step forward and 5 crashing steps backwards.
Hmm.
What was that internal process like for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, for me, my biggest demon, so to speak, has always been low self-worth. And so my default has been to kick myself around and to take whatever's happening in my life, good or bad, and use it as evidence to prove that I'm not good enough. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
in those moments when you've hit a low or you're going through a tough time and it was just so easy for me to compare myself to others or to, you know, beat up on myself, be like, oh, you're such a loser or whatever, you know? And so that was a big part of the journey for me, was actually, and that was the big turning point for me, I think, in my overall journey thus far, has been like actually, you know, rebuilding that self-worth and changing that internal narrative, that voice in my head is now a much more of a cheerleader. And now I'm at the point where I don't really collapse into the beating myself up, low self-worth thing anymore, but it's been like a, you know, 5 or 10 year journey.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say to the men out there? Again, I feel like obviously both men and women have a lot of self-worth stuff that comes from different places, but I feel like men especially carry such a burden of, to be a man, I must show up this way. To be masculine, I must provide, I must do these things. Is there any particular advice that you'd give to other men who are kind of wrestling with that internal demon?
Yeah, definitely. It's like, that is the hero's journey again. It's like, that's the true, like, journey we all need to go on. Like, you can't escape that stuff. It's in there. We all have it in different forms. It comes out in different ways for everybody. Nobody's talking about it. And so you either like deal with it or you don't. And there's this perception that things like therapy or spiritual practices or working with somebody like you or whatever is like, you know, is weakness. And well, in reality, I think hiding from that stuff is weakness. Pretending like everything's fine when it's not, is weakness. Like,
Yeah.
what's masculine and strong is to, you know, recognize and acknowledge that you could use some polishing up in an area, and then go find tools that'll help you do that. And I see guys doing it every day in men's group, you know, 300-pound biker bros, like the most classic macho guys you can do, with tattoos all over their arms and everything, are showing up. And they're like, you know, I've had 5 breakups recently and I thought it was them, but I realize now it's me and some of my emotional reactions, and I want to do something about it. And I'm
That's
like,
awesome.
that's cool. That is cool. Like, that's a winner, you know?
Yeah. That gives me goosebumps. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Another thing that we talk about in the journey mapping process is the role of mentors. And I feel like that's very inherent to having a men's group. But I'd love to hear more about your own experience with mentors, either internally or externally, and how that really supported you.
Yeah. Great question. Um, this is a topic that comes up in a men's group a lot, right? Because guys are joining because they don't have any healthy male role models. They don't really have any mentors, and maybe they didn't have one growing up. Maybe they did have one, but it wasn't a healthy situation similar to mine. Or perhaps they've just become isolated in their adulthood and they don't have anybody to look to. And so I personally haven't been able to find any like one size fits all mentors, right? Like, I've been able to pick and choose from books and podcasts, and, you know,
Yeah.
maybe Rich Roll for health, or Ryan Holiday for philosophy, and maybe this person for emotional intelligence and whatever. But
Yep.
what I've seen in a resource like a men's group is that when you have 12 guys sitting in a circle, there's always one or two guys who've been through it who can act almost like as mentors by sharing their experience and what they learned and what worked for them and what didn't work for them. And so it's almost like a done for you mentor makeshift situation that I find very useful, you know?
Yeah. You bring up such a great point. I mean, childhood has such a huge impact on who we are and what our subconscious programming is and our strategies for succeeding in life. If you're willing, would you share a little bit about your childhood and how you feel like that contributed to where you ended up, kind of that dark night of a soul period?
How much time do you have? Because I could talk about this stuff for hours. There's a lot there. There's a lot to get into. I came from a household that was very loving, and then the outside, it would look like a Leave It to Beaver kind of family. That's dating myself, that reference, but like perfect, you know, family, 2 kids, 2 parents. We didn't have a lot of money, but we were, you know, doing the things we needed to do. I played a lot of hockey growing up. But what you couldn't see from the outside is that, you know, it was a bit of, like a lot of households of this generation, it was like, you know, not an emotionally expressive place. And there was a lot of disapproval, a lot of shaming, a lot of guilt tripping. And so then I go out into the world with that as my default, thinking that I need to people please certain love. I need to, that intimacy is a thing that can be painful, all these things. And then I venture into the world and I run into a few adversities, and then that narrative just takes over, you know?
Yeah.
And so it really affected my ability to show up at work, because I'd run into adversity and I'd be feeling all these strong emotions, and I couldn't be effective at what I was doing. It showed up in my health. I think that's a great contributor to why I ran into chronic health issues. Yeah. And then also, most importantly, it showed up in my romantic relationships. Specifically, you know, coming in with anxious tendencies, like anxious attachment style, you know, and like really needing, craving intimacy that I didn't get when I was younger. That can be too much for some people. And then people pleasing tendencies, which cause all sorts of issues, and codependencies. So yeah, I really that really set the stage for most of my 20s and the majority of my 30s thus far. Yeah. And it's been a 5-year process, maybe a little bit longer, to unravel all that, you know?
Yeah. What has played the biggest role for you in unraveling that?
That's a great question. And nobody really talks about this, Stephanie. So I want to get into it in like a non-kooky way, if you will. So for me, I tried a lot of things, right? I journaled, I did affirmations, I did, you know, self-worth journaling, I went and saw therapists, and those are all helpful, you know, those are all great things. I did a Tony Robbins seminar. I tried a bunch of different stuff, right? And I have a lot of very successful friends who are doing meaningful projects, who are into self-worth and self-development. And so I learned a lot from them too, but I felt like my issues were still there. You know, my emotions were still there at the end of the day. And I kept finding myself being triggered by similar things and having similar reactions and habits that I couldn't get out of. And the thing that actually moved the needle on that made the difference was something called somatic meditation or somatic experiencing. Yeah. And I did it almost as a last resort. A friend recommended that, you know, I just go do a session with a coach, basically. And all it was is I walked into a room, and there was a sweet old lady there, and I lied down on the floor, and she basically just like got me to breathe, and then got me to focus on the sensations that were happening in my body. And that's really it. You know, her job there was to keep my mind out of it, but just to let whatever was in here kind of start to move. And so if I sit with myself often, it's tension in here, and the body holds tension. Any good massage therapist can tell you that, right? Nervous system just holds on to it when we're stressed. It's the default of how we work. Okay, so we hold on to these things. And so it ended up, you know, as I hung out with those things and breathed into them, all of a sudden, oh, there's some crying tingles. All of a sudden, oh, I feel angry all of a sudden. Just little flutters at the beginning, you know? And then over 2 sessions, 3 sessions, nothing really happened. But I was like, I think there's something to this, because I'm getting in, like that masculine training that I have of like closing off my throat, stopping the emotions from coming out, pushing them down, you know, that thing was starting to open up a little bit. And I was like, okay. And then sure enough, 4th session, you know, I'm just breathing into those things. She's like encouraging those things to be there. And then, you know, started coming out. I had a really good cry. I'm like, where did that come from? You know, because it wasn't around anything particular. I was like, okay, there's something to this. There's this well of pain that's held in my body. And the more that I cleared that out, the lighter I felt, the less I was triggered by the things I used to be, and the less I experienced things like self-worth issues, anger, sadness, life just got easier.
Yeah. It's amazing to me how powerful our emotions are and how we think that just because we've managed to stuff them down or bypass them, that they're gone, but they just like fester in our body and our nervous system and our cells. And so I love that you shared that. What was it like for you? I think of one of my dear friends who's done a lot of personal growth work, and he told me when we first met that he didn't realize he had more than two emotions. He thought he was happy or angry.
Yes,
And when
I hear
he
that a lot.
really, when
Yeah.
he really started doing his own growth and healing work, being exposed to such a wide range of emotions and having no skill at all in managing them or being able to feel them, what was that like for you?
Um, like learning Chinese or something, like just like completely out of my wheelhouse, just like,
Yeah.
and it's so intimidating because we've not had any training in this. We've had nobody demonstrate it. There aren't a ton of resources out there for men to get into
Yeah.
their emotions. And don't get me wrong. I think the same things apply for women. I'm sure there's lots of women who lack community and are reeling to figure out their emotions as well. But I just know men because I've been doing this for so long, and I see them, a lot of them being really intimidated and nervous about getting into it. They don't know if they're going to start exploding all over the place. Are they gonna collapse into a puddle and not be able to show up for their
Yeah.
family and work? Are they going to be ridiculed and criticized as being weak or gay or whatever? Yeah, there's like a real fear in there for a lot of men.
Yeah. Such an important topic. I could talk about that forever.
And I think a lot of people interpret it as though men don't want to talk about these things, or people
Right.
don't want to talk about these things, when really they're just scared, like childhood scared, like little kids scared inside about, um, and they don't even understand why, about
Yeah.
revealing some of the things they're feeling and thinking. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I know you talked about it a little bit, but how did unlocking and processing out that all of those stored emotions, how did that start to affect you and your relationships and your life?
Yeah, such a great question. Again, how much time do you have? I don't think we have enough time here. Um, well, a few areas of my life where I noticed it the most. Number one, I was getting a lot less triggered with my family. So like the trying relationship I have with my dad, I was just less reactive, less emotional with him. He was doing the same old moves, but I was like, I don't know, I'd still be a little bit upset, but it wouldn't, crash my entire day or make me fly off the handle or something. Okay, so that's good, right? I feel like I released enough of that pressure cooker well that was in my body.
Yeah.
And so I kept doing that. And in romantic relationships, I stopped feeling I felt less needy, you know,
Mm,
like that, whatever that thing was that I cried out, it was clearly creating this void that was like making me try to feel something, that neediness was trying to get me. I was trying to take something from relationships, and it's like the more that I got that stuff out, the more I could just show up and actually enjoy the experience with feeling less anxiety and less sadness and putting less pressure on them to like fill that void for me. That's a big
yeah.
thing, because in a number of my relationships, like I got the feedback that I was putting pressure on, I had unreasonable expectations on them, and that
Yeah.
led them to breaking up with me or cheating or whatever, hitting the eject button. So, and then with work, I just found adversity in work just easier to handle. I took it less personally. It's just like stuff that might have been considered bad news before. I just kind of switch into problem solving mode. Whereas before I'd be like, oh, this thing isn't going to work, and I give up, and all this story that, was
Yeah.
tied to my baggage from before. So yeah,
Yeah.
lots of different areas of my life, my health. Yeah.
Did
All
you keep
slowly improved.
doing somatic experiencing work?
Yeah. Yeah, I have. Unfortunately, I don't know what you want to call her coach. She's like a sweet old lady. She's like the grandma I never had. Unfortunately, she moved away to lead trainings in another part of the world, so I haven't found a replacement. But honestly, I feel like I could use it. I don't know if you can relate to this, but I just feel a little tense in here. I feel like I could.
Yeah.
There's something in there. I feel like, okay, I could use a good cry sometime soon, or something like that. And so, to
Yeah.
be honest, I could use it, and I recommend it every day in men's groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said something that stood out to me and reminded me of my own journey. I had so much stored and unresolved grief and trauma that my body was shutting down. So I had a lot of back and hip pain. I couldn't walk, stand, lay down. Everything hurt. I couldn't swallow. I was having panic attacks, and I did what I called a full court press, where it was like, if anyone recommended anything, I was going to try it. And you said somatic experiencing was kind of a last resort for you. Were there other modalities that you tried?
Yeah, I mean, it's just normal cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
That was great. Like, talking about it gave me awareness around these things. It's the reason why I'm able to be articulate with them now in a setting like this with you. The problem with that, though, is that it was like up here and it wasn't actually helping. I needed somebody to actually pull this stuff out of me, and I needed a coach to do it. I couldn't just do it in my living room by myself. So that's why that made a difference. But I tried meditation and journaling and First Nations sweat lodges and, men's groups here. And what else? Self-authoring, like that's Jordan Peterson stuff, like where you rewrite your life story, affirmations, Tony Robbins stuff, like positive psychology stuff. Yeah, and it was all beneficial to a degree, but I had this impression I could build my self-worth, like, oh, if I just tell myself that I'm good enough that it would happen. Problem is that my body had this huge well of feelings that was the opposite, that had been drilled into me by, with the experiences I mentioned earlier. So those things are beneficial, journaling, morning pages, those kinds of things. And now I do those things with greater success. But like back then, that stuff didn't have a huge impact because I still had this like part of me that really had this belief that I wasn't good enough or whatever. So it wasn't until I actually cried that stuff out or shook that stuff out in breath work or somatic meditation stuff, which sounds kooky, but it's just breathing in the body to let it release. That's it.
Yeah.
It's just the default of our nervous system. So I tried a lot of things. Yeah.
Very powerful stuff. One thing I talk about in my work is this concept of the void, and it's kind of the gateway between surface level life and going deeper into ourselves, or connecting with God and source, or the energy that is, whatever you want to call it. And I feel like a lot of the times, I know I've had this too, we have resistance to going deep into those emotions because we're so terrified that they're going to consume us. Like, even though intellectually I knew I couldn't disappear from crying, when I would cry so hard and move my grief, I was certain that this was it. I'm just going to disappear. I'm not going to get back up off the floor. Did you have any resistance to those big waves of emotion coming out?
Are you kidding? Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, I was terrified, and I still am. Like, even though I've done this stuff and I know that it's beneficial, when it's starting to well up, I'm like, no. And now I know enough to like encourage it, like overcome that and encourage it. But our brains are hardwired to keep us away from pain, and this stuff is painful. It's going back and dredging up uncomfortable feelings, sometimes painful memories.
Yeah.
More often than not, I didn't have any memory associated with the feelings. It was just more like a release, and I was left like wondering what that was about. But it's uncomfortable stuff, and that's why it's the hero's journey, and that's why the majority of people out there will not do it. They're too scared of their own feelings, which is tragic.
Yeah, so true. Well, talk to us a little bit about how all of your own growth and healing work and being introduced to other men's groups really kind of set you on this trajectory to have the company and the life that you have today.
Yeah, thanks. I actually resisted this, being a men's group guy. Like, I came by it honestly. I was, like I mentioned before, I was living in this country and I was lonely, and I just threw my friends into a Facebook group, and that turned into the first organization I ran was like a men's group for entrepreneurs. And I had an intention of it being able to chat about business and life and stuff. But then after we'd ski together and the guys would bond, we'd sit in a circle, and the first guy would be like, because he'd feel close to the other guys after sharing the experience. And I think I'm relatively good at getting people to open up. He would say something like, my wife just had 3 miscarriages and I have no idea how to support her, and she's depressed and I'm feeling sad. What do I do? And he'd be crying. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, I didn't expect this, but I loved it. I loved it. And so I did that for a while. And then for the entrepreneurs, and I realized it was all personal stuff. So then when I got sick, I had to sell that business to that first men's group company because I couldn't manage it anymore. And so after that, I was like, I want to do something cool. I want to be an influencer, or I want to be like a sports guy or like a commentator or something. And so I tried filming, surfing, and tried doing this and that and all these like, social media things. And I was really resisting the truth, which is that this is my nature. There's an incredible book on career that I just happen to have here because I was just talking about it in the men's group called Let Your Life Speak by Parker J. Palmer. And the whole it's a cute little book about career, the journey of finding career. And the concept is that most people try to force like a career and a purpose and a direction, but vocation chooses you. Like we all have a nature, things we're naturally made for. And for me, I just couldn't get away from the fact that I feel, it seems like I'm well suited for this. And so friends started asking me, hey, can you start another one? And that's what led to, mensgroup.com.
Yeah.
I just felt like I couldn't get away from it.
So funny. There are a lot of times where I'm like, I really just want to live on a farm and not be on social media and not like have to be the face of my company and my mission. But with purpose work, you can't escape it. It follows you. And it's like at least for me, it feels like it has to move through me. I have to do it or it will kill me.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I feel similar things. I don't know. I can't say for sure 100% of it comes from a healthy place for me. It could come from like a place of insecurity and trying to prove myself through doing meaningful things, trying to prove my work. But regardless, it has a positive benefit in the world and I enjoy it. So I'm like, okay, there's different types of people out there. I fantasize similar to you some days about being able to work at the auto parts store, or being able to like sell widgets on Amazon or something, something simple.
Yeah.
But I can't get, it seems like this is what I'm meant to be doing. So that's allowed me to do that. Yeah.
I love the way you share that. Like you have such a deep level of self-awareness where you're able to name, you're not sure. It could come from a place that isn't necessarily positive. And I just think that that's something that we're never taught and that we're often lacking. And the more we do our growth and healing work, the more we're able to have it. And I think in the process, at least for me, in my experience and with a lot of my clients, as we start to gain more of the self-awareness, as we start to look at our subconscious programming and our winning strategies and our attachment styles and our core wounds and like all of this stuff that has been running our lives, even though we think we have free will and we're making all these conscious choices, it's all being run by that subconscious piece.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's this confusing process of reorienting after we start doing this work, after we heal, especially to ourselves and our life and our work. And you've talked about that a little bit, but if there's anything else that you would want to share about your journey that you think would be helpful for people around that process of waking up and being more self-aware and healing stuff, and what was it like to reorient to your life?
Yeah, great question. And this is actually something that comes up in men's group is like a lot. It's like these guys, they're starting to build some emotional awareness or situational awareness in their lives. And they're like, how do I get clear on like what I need in a given moment, set boundaries and like what I should be doing and what the right direction is for me? And it seems like the answer that I've just seen other guys present is that, and it was the same in my journey, is that we all have this internal compass, this like internal voice that's there to guide us, that can tell us when something's right or wrong for us in our unique situation, and unfortunately it gets kind of stomped out by parents who may not have a high level of emotional intelligence, and the school system and media and society is now set up so that you can distract yourself 24 hours a day between movies and video games and porn or whatever else your vice is. It's like, so we're being pushed away from that. But if you sit with yourself over time, that compass that little voice inside of us that's been kind of stomped out, it'll start to come out. It'll start to come out quietly. It'll start to guide you in the right direction, but it's like a muscle, it's atrophied right now, but you have to use it and then it'll start to be built. So I would highly encourage people to, men and women, to like, start to do, work with somebody like you, start to like go through the process of, starting to investigate these different parts of ourselves, because then you, not only do you get rid of the baggage like I was talking about, but then that internal voice that's looking out for you, that yes, this is good for me. No, this is not good for me. Yes, I need to go in this direction. That gets louder and louder, to the point where, I was somebody that struggled with figuring out what I should be doing with my life or days or saying yes or no to people, saying yes in situations where I didn't want to being like really good with boundaries now. Like I like it when I get to set a boundary with somebody, because then I get to see how they react and how
Right.
they handle that. It's a good qualifier for like letting people in my lives. So I would just encourage people to go on this journey, and then it does get easier over time. That internal directional navigational system we all have does get louder, and it truly is the hero's journey. This is the most important work we can do,
Yeah.
because it affects everybody around you. Like if you clear out your baggage and you understand your patterns and you learn to manage those somewhat, we may never get 100% control of them, but manage them better. That'll benefit our romantic partners, our children, our friends, people you run into at the store. It's like, it really does have an impact. So
Yeah.
I encourage
Yeah.
people to take that first step and get into that stuff.
Definitely. One final thing I'd love to kind of chat about before we close out is this idea of purpose.
Mm.
And I know, especially at least what I've read and learned around masculine and feminine energy, the masculine energy is very purpose focused, and
Mm-hmm.
having a sense of purpose, whatever that looks like, is so essential, I think, to everyone's well-being, but can be especially to men. And I would love to hear your take on what purpose is and how we can develop it for ourselves.
Oh, I don't even know how to answer that. It's such a great question. It's like when people ask me what masculinity is, I'm like, I don't know. I just have my own experience. I just have my own experience of having a deeper voice and broader shoulders and being able to hit things in sports. Like, I don't know what masculinity is for everybody else. Purpose seems to be this little, again, it's just like, it's again, comes back to this little concept of like, this little whisper inside of you that's like, this is interesting or this isn't interesting, For I don't know how many people are there in the world. 7 billion people right now. There's probably like 100 that would like to do what I do, and they would find this interesting, So I don't know why. I just was just drawn to it. I was just pulled to it. And some people that might be a completely different thing. It might be fishing, or it might be I don't know, writing, or it might be there's just this. We're just drawn to certain little things. And I've been somebody who, luckily, and I don't know why, I've been somebody who pursues those things. And so that has led to purposes. When I go down an avenue of, this could be interesting, and I explore it, and I'm like, ooh, this really feels good. And then all of a sudden it becomes something that I want to dedicate myself to. That's how purpose shows up in my life, and how I've lived through it.
Awesome.
Does that make sense?
We're going to share. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if I explained that very well.
No, I resonate with that fully. I talk a lot about purpose is just who you're here to be and doing the work you're here to do. And that doesn't necessarily mean that your purpose is your job. It's just how you feel called to contribute. And I believe that we're all born into this life with our purpose is hard-coded inside of us. How it expresses itself throughout our life changes based on what we're going through, the times, how we're shaped by life. But it is that like drive towards something. And it's, like I said, for me, this is my purpose work, having these hard conversations and healing and growth. And basically purpose is my purpose. I love helping people step into that, whatever that is for them. But it's this thing that I can't ignore. And if I try to, it's like it eats me up inside, and it's different for everyone. Some people want to change the world and help with things like global warming or ending world hunger, and others it's like, I just want to make pretty things and I want to give them to people so that I want to raise kids, and neither one is better or worse.
No, that's such an important topic that I having been somebody who's been around a lot of high achieving people, because that men's group for entrepreneurs, a lot of those guys went on to be the guys whose podcasts we listen to now and the books we read and all these things. And these guys who are having a big impact, often it doesn't come from a healthy place. It comes from trying to fill a void and these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And if you look at their private lives behind the scenes, they're actually not that happy. Whereas the guy who's a janitor, but he's like, he finds joy in making people's day with jokes or something like that. Who's having a bigger impact there? Who's actually better off? This whole notion that you have to do something big and meaningful, like go work for Greenpeace or go feed starving kids in Africa, like that's not true for everybody. And I was at the border, the US-Canada border the other day, riding my bike with my girlfriend. And there's a section where there's no fence. right? It's just like one road beside the other and a little ditch, and that's it. And so we thought that was cool. So we decided to take our bikes and put them up against the marker that indicates this is the border. and we're about to take a selfie. My bike falls into the United States. I'm like, oh, this isn't good. This is not good. Sure enough, Border Patrol rolls up, lights on and everything. Canadian, luckily, and rolls up and screeches the tires. And I'm mid selfie, and I think I'm going to jail. I'm like, this isn't good. And the guy drives up and screeches his tires, and so I walk over to him like, oh, what's up, officer? And he's like, I just wanted to bomb your selfie.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and this guy had such a jolly energy about him. He literally made our day. And so purpose doesn't always have to manifest in your work. I think it often does for a lot of people, but like, just, you know, you run into these individuals that are garbage man or like a Border Patrol officer who are just like having a good time, trying to make people, give people little laughs and stuff. And I'm like,
living their best life.
Yeah. That might have more positive impact than somebody who's doing solar farming in India or something. I don't know, you know? So it doesn't have to be through work, and it doesn't have to be a grand thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much of your journey. We're going to put all your amazing info and links in the show notes. But before we sign off, if you would share where people can find you, that would be awesome.
Yeah, it's just mensgroup.com. We just run online men's groups there. We got a blog with some great resources, and just trying to invite as many normal guys to come and have a chat if they feel like it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Stephanie. I enjoyed it. Keep up your great work.